Welcome to this brand new lesson where we are going to step into a new direction and this is going to be for horizontal scrolling. And horizontal scrolling can be really cool. It can be a great addition to a layout, assuming you pull it off correctly and it feels seamless and it works well. So in this video, we're going to do a super simple example, mainly because there's some new concepts. And so if our HTML markup is very minimal, it's going to help you understand those core concepts. And then in the next lesson, we're going to really step it up a notch with a more elaborate example, but using the same concepts. So here in the before project, we have 0 HTML markup outside of the script tags. So what we're going to do is we're going to have just a few HTML elements to make this all work. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a div class. I'm just going to call it outer. And the purpose of this element in a second is we're going to style that with CSS in such a way that it has overflow X hidden. That means this is the sole purpose of this parent container where all of our scroll elements are going to be is just to get rid of the horizontal scroll bar. Otherwise, if you leave it out, I'll show you what happens. But just hold on to that thought for a second. Then we want to have another parent container that will house the different sections that we have that we want to be a part of our horizontal scroll, container. So we're going to call this one, you can call it whatever you want. I'm just going to give it a div class of scroll. Now inside of here are our individual sections. Now of course they don't have to be technically section markups in HTML. It could be whatever markup you want to use, but it's pretty typical just to use a section for each I guess you could say slide that's a part of the horizontal scroll. So what I'm going to put here is a section with a simple H1. How are you today? Literally that simple. That's all the markup that's going to go in our single section. And these sections, it's the typical pattern is that it'll consume 100% of the viewport and 100% of the viewport height and width. So it just consumes the whole screen. You don't have to do it that way, but that's the typical pattern. That's how we'll do it. So then I'm just going to copy and paste that 3 times so that we have 3 sections. I'm going to say, I'm fine, you, and then this final one, great, thanks for asking. Okay, we simulated a very strange conversation, and that's pretty good right there for the markup. Now, let's go ahead and revert back to our CSS. Now, right now, if we make sure you're running your live server extension so we can see exactly what's happening here. Let me get rid of this. There we go. All right, so this is what we have so far. There's no styling except for just changing the body to this dark background using a font family of Poppins and also a color of white. So let's go ahead and structure our actual sections. So to do this, the first thing I guess we want to do is we want to take a look at the parent of the sections, which is the div class scroll. So that's the parent element, and so I'm going to say scroll, that's our parent. We're going to say display flex, which will automatically put those, take them from going stack to going into columns. So they'll be next to each other, which is what we want. So for instance, if we look at that, now they're 1, 2, and section 3 right there. Okay, that works. We're also going to specify a width of 300% because I know in this case we have 3 sections that will be 100% width each. Now you can see right down here this horizontal scroll bar, which is what we don't want. We'll deal with that in a second. But let's go ahead and style the actual sections. So we're going to say section. Zoom this up here a little bit bigger. Control B, get rid of that sidebar. And I'm going to say height, 100 viewport height. If I could type. We're going to say a width of 100%, display grid, place content center, and then also we're going to, well, let's just save that for now. I'm just looking at my markup here. All right, so now we can't use our mouse scroll wheel to scroll through this, but if I use this horizontal scroll, we can scroll through them. And that's not an ideal use case for a horizontal scroller to make a person have to physically click on this. You want to be able to use your mouse scroll wheel to scroll through this. So to get rid of that scroll bar, notice we have that div class outer, which we have not styled yet. So all I have to do is just take outer, say overflow, or -x, hidden. So if I save this, guess what? It's bye-bye, and we no longer can access the other two slides that are hanging off the side here. All right. So now that we have that situated, there's just a couple other things I wanted to do. I wanted to take the background color of the second and third section and just change them so that we can physically see those different sections as we scroll through them. So nth of type 2, nth of type 3, that's for section 2 and section 3. We're just giving them their different background colors. Again, we're not going to be able to see it because we have overflow X hidden right here. Of course, if we were to take that off, we'll be able to scroll through and see these different sections and their colors. Okay, let's add that back. And now, of course, we can't scroll through that anymore. So now let's go back and let's tie in our GreenSock animation platform just so that we can now, be able to scroll through these elements and try to get them to work as much as possible. So what we're going to do is we're going to say let scroller equals document.query selector. We're going to get our scroll right there. We're also going to get our sections. So sections equals gsap.utils.toArray, because we're dealing with an array of multiple sections. I'm going to say scroll section. All right. So the reason I'm doing scroll first and then section is because I might have multiple sections throughout this demo, which we will at the top and bottom, just to show you how the scroll mechanics work when you integrate like an interior horizontal scrolling section. It's actually really cool. All right, so now we have all of our sections. And then additionally, we're also, well, actually, I think we're good for there right now. Okay, so at this point, what we want to do is we want to define a property, variable that's tied to a simple tween. And the purpose of this particular GreenSock animation is to help us be able to use like our mouse scroll wheel or the vertical scroll bar to go to kind of like horizontally scroll through those three sections essentially. So what we'll do, and this part's really important, we could just say gsap2 right here, and that's fine and it would work, but we're going to tie this and associate it with a property or a variable, and we're going to call it scroll tween. Let scroll tween equals gsap2. Now, the reason we're doing this when we haven't done it yet in the course is because it's going to become very handy and very useful in a second, and you're going to see, or in a few minutes, and you're going to see why we did this. So just hang with me on that one. So we're going to put the sections into right here in the first parameter. This is very important. You don't want to put the scroll element or the outer element. You want to put literally the sections that you gain right here for this to work properly. All right. Now the first value we're going to put is X%. And this is going to look strange. It's exactly what it's suggesting right here. We're going to put -100. Now remember, X% is just a percentage value on the X-axis. And we're going to put -% and we're going to multiply this by sections.length, which tells us how many sections, and then a -1. What this will essentially do is it's going to direct, it's handling the direction of the scroll for that element, if that makes sense. We're also going to put ease none, which is very important because it's going to make the scrolling through it's going to be natural. It's not going to have any unnatural easing applied to it. It would be kind of strange otherwise. All right, so we're going to save that, and then we're going to put a scroll trigger to associate it with this one. And the trigger itself is going to be scroll. Okay, so if we go up here, this is the parent container of the sections. Okay, next up, we're going to put pin true. We're also going to put scrub 1. And then we're also going to put an end value. And we're going to say plus equals document.query. Actually, no, we could just use scroller. We already tied an associated variable with it. So scroller dot offset width. All right. So this end value, we can play around with this, and I'll show you kind of how it works, but it kind of affects the speed at which you scroll through the elements. So here I go. Right now, I'm just using my mouse scroll wheel, and then also additionally, if you left click and drag the actual scroll bar, you will see it work as well. And it's just very nice and smooth. And notice there's no, it's not actually snapping to any of these sections. And we can certainly achieve that though. So what we can do is we could say snap. All right, we could say 1 divided by the sections dot length minus 1. So if we save this, watch what happens. Notice how it just shifted over. So if I scroll over here, just pause for a second, and it just basically gets us right to that particular section that we want to be exactly, precisely. So that's an option that you can utilize if you wish. Otherwise, just turn it off and you can tinker around with that as well. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and see if we can actually animate each one of the H1 elements that are in here based on when they come into the viewport with a scroll trigger. It's not as easy as if this were just a vertical, sections that are on top of each other. In a horizontal context, you'll see we have to use something called container animation, which is relatively new within the last year or so to GreenSock, and it really just makes your life 1,000 times easier. So to do that, we're just going to take all of our sections. Now again, our sections right here is just the GSAP utils to array. And what we're going to say is for each. Then we pass in our section. And inside of here, we can say GSAP from. We'll take our section.query selector H1. Okay, so we're scoping the H1 element that exists within each section. So we put section.query selector. All right, you don't just put H1 because it'll just grab them all. It won't work correctly. Once we do that, we can then open this up, and let's say maybe we want the opacity. It's going to go from opacity 0, so we won't see it initially. Maybe also from a -100 pixel value on the y-axis, so it'll come up and down and fade in. And then we set the scroll trigger. All right, so for our scroll trigger, our trigger property is actually going to be section query selector H1. Same thing as this value right here. And then we're going to put in our container animation property, which is brand new to us. If we don't add this, it won't work properly. When we set it to scroll tween, which is in reference to this tween right here. All right, so this kind of notifies us that this is a horizontal scrolling animation, and this will make it work essentially. Otherwise, if you leave it off, it will not work. The start of this is just going to be left center, and then we'll put toggle actions to play, none, reverse. Alrighty, let's hit save. And let's see. All right, so we saw that one fall down into place. Let's let this come in. Let me refresh. For some reason, when I did that, it didn't push me all the way to where, there it goes. And there we go. Now what's cool is because of our toggle actions, it's reversing those animations, as you can see, as they leave the viewport, which is very, very, very cool. Now what's also cool is, let me demonstrate this. Sometimes you might have a horizontal scroll section that's embedded into, maybe a long landing page of some sort, where people are just scrolling horizontally, then all of a sudden they hit this horizontal scroll, and then all of a sudden they go back to vertical. So just to simulate what that looks like, we could just put a section element right here, and I'm going to give it a different color. We'll just do an inline style. So style is background color purple. And then we'll also put in a H3 this time and just say hi. Here, let's fix that styling up. There we go. And then also we'll have a section with the H3 of by at the bottom. Now let's save it. Now what's really cool, we're gonna go all the way back up, refresh. Now you can see we'll scroll down, then all of a sudden things are moving horizontally, and then we go back down to buy, which is very, 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 very cool. I love it. So one thing that's also within your ability is you can turn these, like this section right here, into an actual scrub-based animation just by specifying something like scrub 1, hit save. And now if we scroll down, this is going to be tied, the animations will be tied to the scroll position. And again, not probably a good idea with type, just because you don't want a situation happening like where there's barely readable type when a person stops and it might look strange. So just think about that when you're using scrub-based animations. So now that we know how to do that, in the next lesson, we're going to have a much more interesting, elaborate example using the same concepts.